Okay.
Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, lovely people. This is Marie Alessi with Shannon Traphagen for yet another Upspiral Grief interview. And unfortunately, we could not do this live. However, I'm not going to waste any time on that and just want to say a very warm welcome and thank you for your patience, Shannon. So good to have you here. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good now. Thank you. So, I just wanted to share a quick story, as per usual, how we actually connected. And you can even probably tell it better than I, because we had this pre-chat before we went to do this interview together. And we actually connected on LinkedIn, and you found a post about something that I did. I'm not really sure what post that was. And you're like, hey, I don't know that person. Let's connect. And to cut a very long story short, a lot of emails in the background going back and forth. And you also have a really, really beautiful podcast that we will share a bit more about. And here we are. So I really that your story was so inspiring to me. I wanted you to come on with me and share where you started, where you got to, but I'm going to get you to introduce yourself quickly to our audience, please. Welcome.
Sure. Thank you. So, like Marie said, my name is Shannon Traphagen, and I am a young widow. I am 45 years old. I lost my husband when I was 43 to brain cancer. And through the course of his death, realized that I needed to find some purpose and meaning in the loss that I had suffered through losing him, and subsequently 3 miscarriages, an adoption, and then actually within the year of his loss, we lost the first dog we ever got together on Christmas Eve within the year that he passed away. So there was a lot of loss in a very short amount of time. And I knew that I needed to figure out a way to find some meaning and purpose in dealing with it all.
Yeah.
I needed to find a reason to get out of bed every day. And so that was kind of what brought me to the place I'm at now. It's not the path that I was originally on. I had done radio. I'm a published author. I was an associate publisher for a magazine for a long time. I'm a writer, but I never ever considered podcasting, and I never really considered being an advocate in the brain cancer community, let alone a young grief and loss community. And so, the universe has kind of put me in this direction and in this path, and I'm blindly finding my way.
Wow, this is like so much already there in a nutshell, and I'd really like to go into a little bit more detail because, I'm not sure about you, Shannon, but when I became a widow at 45, I really thought that is something so rare that you become a widow at such a young age. And the longer I've been in this community and the longer I've been running Loving Life After Loss, the more young widows I meet and the more I realize that it's actually unfortunately not such a rare thing like I thought. There's a huge community out there, and just by looking at the stats of the movement Loving Life After Loss, there's the majority is between 45 and 55, so that's already quite young, but there's also the second largest part of our movement is between 35 and 45. So it's really quite shocking when you think about, I honestly thought it was, it was so rare, like until I started looking at stats and started looking at groups and started looking at movements and started building my movement. So if you don't mind, can you take us back to how it all started for you, the story with, when did you actually discover that your husband had brain cancer? Give us a bit of a timeline if that's okay with you.
Yeah. So we discovered he had brain cancer in August of 2019. We were in the process of planning the baby shower for the adoption we had coming in October. And he just wasn't feeling right. And that was the only way to describe it. There were no signs, there were no symptoms. It's interesting. Within like the week leading up to us finding out what was going on, he was struggling at work a little bit. He became a bit more short-tempered, which was not him at all. He was writing things more mathematically, but I didn't know this because I was home. I wasn't with him at work. So until I saw the notepads and stuff that he brought home later on. It was more like you were seeing it was like he was trying to translate English, but the only way he knew how to do that was mathematically because he was an engineer.
Yeah.
But other than that, like, we didn't know that. You wouldn't have seen that at home. So at home, he was completely fine.
Yeah.
And he was just having some anxiety all of a sudden. I mean, it was out of nowhere. There was nothing leading up to it, but within a week and a half or so before we found it, he was just feeling very, very, very anxious,
Yeah.
abnormally so. And we thought maybe it was a bit of brain fog, anxiety brain fog, which is a very real thing in mental health and in emotional health. And when it kept lingering and working out wasn't enough and cycling wasn't enough,
Yeah.
I said, okay, why don't we just go into the doctors and,
Mm.
let's make a list of how you've been feeling. See your
Yeah.
primary care physician first thing tomorrow morning because it was Sunday. And so he sat down, he started making a list and writing everything that he had been feeling for the past week. And then he was trying to write the letter C and he was struggling to write the letter C. And that's when I was like, okay. And I thought maybe he'd had a stroke, like a mini stroke or something was going on. And so I said, we're just going to go into urgent care. Let's just go.
Yeah.
Let's see what's going on. And he passed all baseline protocols, CAT scan, ultrasound.
Incredible.
Um, yeah, everything was coming back normal. And then
Mm.
it was about midnight going into the 19th of August that I finally went out to the nurse's station and said, we've been here for hours. We're exhausted. We never ate dinner. We have 2 dogs we have to get home to, do you know how much longer this is going to be? And she said, well, something popped up on the MRI. And
Yeah.
so a resident's going to come down to talk to you. And that was kind of the beginning of the end. He was diagnosed officially with some type of brain tumor. 3 days later, he had the surgery. And within 24 to 48 hours, he was diagnosed with glioblastoma, which is stage 4 brain cancer. So in a very short period of time, we went from I had actually that summer just had surgery, an infertility surgery to
Yeah.
figure out because we've been trying to have kids for 6 years and we had a few miscarriages. We were getting closer. It just wasn't sticking. And that's something else that nobody talks about. And um, so I had a surgery done and, we found out that there was nothing wrong. Everything was great. We were just kind of battling age at that point, and we said, okay, we're good to go. So, we thought we might have one of our own. We're adopting. We're going
Mm.
to have 2 kids. I just
Yeah.
published my first book.
Yeah.
So we went from this huge high and kind of like this huge, goal, these goals that we had been striving for so long, to all of a sudden everything just came to a standstill.
Yeah.
And the only thing that we had in our sights in that moment was saving his life. And I never, ever expected us to get to that place.
Yeah.
And then within 14 months, he was gone. He actually, 2 years ago this month, 2 years ago next week, it'll be the second anniversary of his death.
Wow.
Mhm.
Just wow, because this is such a little amount of time, really, in that
Yeah.
time frame that happened. And also sorry. I think something when you focus on the brain cancer journey,
Mhm.
and you told me about your miscarriages, I think, how did you go with that? There was literally no real time to focus on healing that. It went from
Mhm.
one loss to the next, to the next, to the next, like all these, I don't even want to call them little losses because they're actually quite big. For a woman, there's
Mhm.
this hope and the building up and the hope that this time it will work, and then another miscarriage, and then that,
Mhm.
and all the way through
Yeah.
your husband passing, and then what happened then with the adoption, because there is another, this is just this accumulated loss story that you have. Do you mind sharing that?
Mhm. No, yeah, that's fine. It's interesting when, with each miscarriage we had, I I'm a person of very strong faith. And so I really held to that and just said, okay, for whatever reason, this just isn't happening, but I know we're meant to be parents. So somehow, some way, it'll take shape, and it doesn't matter how it looks, as long as we can be a mom and a dad, and that's okay. And
Yeah.
so I really held on to that, and that really gave me strength in the beginning.
Yeah.
We waited for 2.5 years for the adoption. So while we were going through the miscarriages, we were sitting here waiting, you're waiting to get picked. You're like, like you're putting this great book together, and you're just hoping that somebody's going to see you and pick you and, realize what great parents you're going to be.
Oh,
And we kept getting passed over and kept getting passed over. And we're like, okay. And then we finally got chosen by this beautiful woman who was just really having a hard time and struggling with life, and just couldn't be the mom that she wanted to be. And so she chose us, and we were ecstatic.
of course.
And we spoke to her on the phone, and um, it was actually I think 3 weeks before he was actually diagnosed, we did a gender reveal.
Yeah.
And he'd flown back from a work trip. I met him at my sister's, and I still have the video of it. I found out the gender. She sent me the ultrasound to surprise me, and
Mm.
then I surprised him. So we did these little chocolates with the color inside, and you bite into it. And so we were super excited going into the fall season. We figured, this is just a great way to start the fall. And we knew that even if I never got pregnant, as long as we got to be parents
Yeah.
somehow, that was all we really wanted. We had a very blessed life. We were very grateful for everything that we had.
Yeah.
Um, so when he got diagnosed, it was it was interesting. So the adoption agency backed out because of the prognosis of
Yeah.
his disease.
Yeah.
But then the birth mom actually called us and said she didn't care about his disease. She wanted us no matter what.
Oh, wow.
And that was the hardest part for us, because that meant trying to find a way to do private adoption. But she lived in a different state,
Yeah.
and he was in the throes, literally in the thick of getting on steroids, starting
Yeah.
radiation. Um, so it was extremely, we had many conversations back and forth figuring out if we could make it work. And I just couldn't feasibly see how to get to fly to a different state to take care of and bring home a brand new baby,
Yeah.
and also try to save his life, and 24 hours a day just focus on trying to get him to survive somehow.
Yeah.
And so we sat in the baby's room that we had put together, and sat on the edge of the bed and told her where we were at, and that maybe down the road, 6 months later or something, we could revisit talking to her about it. But that at that moment, we just couldn't see a way around
Yeah.
trying to get down there to do that. And I just felt like it was too much.
Yeah.
And he felt like it was too, and we were just crying. We were both just devastated.
Yeah.
And so it was a really difficult decision. And then after losing him, I'm still in counseling. I mean, I go every single
Yeah.
week. Um, but I don't even know if I've gotten to a point where I've been able to comprehend those losses, because I'm still trying to navigate getting my footing after losing him. I mean, we were together for 20 years.
I
So
want to say two things here quickly, if you don't mind me pausing here for one moment.
sure.
First of all, I know this is a very confronting question, if you don't mind. At what stage did you know, or did you at all, that he's not going to make it?
Um, I didn't at
Mm.
all. We held on to hope the entire. It's interesting because he was actually doing very well. Um, he was responding extremely well to treatment. We got to a place right before Thanksgiving where we got an MRI result that showed that his tumor shrunk dramatically.
Wow.
And then before Christmas, they weren't seeing any evidence of any activity anywhere.
Wow.
So that was astounding to the oncologist. And he
Yeah.
was kind of holding Mike up as the poster boy. Holy cow, whatever it is we're doing, this could be working. And the gold standard in brain cancer care is to get you to the 5-year mark. If you can get beyond 5 years, you're
Yeah.
doing pretty good. And so that was our goal, was to try to get to the 5-year mark. And so when we saw these results, we thought, okay, we must be doing something okay.
Yeah.
And then when we started to get closer to the 1-year anniversary of his diagnosis, he started losing a lot of weight. He was throwing up very frequently. And I didn't know what was going on. We just thought that, okay, there's some setbacks, something's happened, something's changed. And we got, it took a lot of advocating actually on my end because the oncologist wasn't listening. And so I finally said, something has changed. Something's shifted. It's not in his head. It's not anxiety. Something is going on. He had just had an MRI done right before all this, and it was still clear. The scan was the same as before. What we didn't know was that the cancer had moved into his cerebral spinal fluid.
Oh,
And so that's why it wasn't showing up in his head anymore,
yeah.
because it all transitioned into the spine. And that's extremely rare. I mean, brain cancer is very rare to begin with. And all of a sudden, you went from having a rare disease to an even rarer occurrence where 0.15%, I mean, barely 1% of the population of brain cancer patients have leptomeningeal disease, which is what this was.
Yeah.
And at that point, there's just nothing you can do. So it never really hit me that this, especially within 14 months, I mean, you're just so focused on thinking positively, holding out hope that you're going to be able to, move forward in some way and find some level of normalcy within this new normal. And so we never had those conversations around what if. We held off on that. And then by the time he was diagnosed with leptomeningeal disease, everything, it was just rapid fire. I mean, he lost his speech. He couldn't walk anymore. He ended up in the cancer center his last 6 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks of life. So it just, I mean, within 2 months, not even, all of it went. So it was just at that point, it honestly, I don't think it hit until the day that he left us. And even then I was just still kind of in shock that, okay, yeah, this just happened. I just, he's officially no longer here. So I don't know if that realization was ever there, up until even the very last day.
I want to thank you so much for sharing that. So, from such a raw and real place, because this is so many people think, oh, you've got time to prepare and talk about it. But in reality, there is often that first of all, you are clinging on to hope, because that's all you want to do. You really want for the person to get better. And in particular, with the results he's been showing, fair enough. And people always say, oh, you've got so much time to talk about that when but that knowing often doesn't come for people. So I really want to thank you for sharing that, because this is such a reality to most people who are going through that. And the other thing I wanted to say to you, Shannon, is I just really want to congratulate you and say kudos to you that you are still going through therapy, because this is another thing that I find so important, to actually find professional help. And it really doesn't matter what that is, as long as it helps you. You need to find, everyone needs to find what works for them. And even I want to share that quickly, how real that is, because for me it's been 4.5 years since Rob died, and just recently, 2.5 months ago, his dad passed away as well. So for me, that was like the third father figure in my life that passed. First my dad when I was 20, then Rob when I was 45, and then his dad passed away. It was just so incredible to see the differences, how I dealt with every single one of them. It was completely different with each stage, with each person, and that has triggered a lot for me in terms of Rob's passing. And I decided to go back to counseling, and I haven't been in counseling for 4 years. So for me, that is a really important step, and I fully own it, and I want to share it here to keep things real, because it brought up anxiety for me. Have I done the right thing by the boys in supporting them through their grandfather's passing, in supporting them because they must have had triggers. I mean, I watched this, like we were there in the same room when Rob's dad passed. We were there for him, with him when he died. The entire family came together. So it was very confronting. It was very raw, but it was also very sacred. So I just want to say this is something that I can't talk about enough, how important it is to find the right help. And I think it's fantastic that you are doing that. So after that little sidestep, I think there's such a timeline for you, you know, with the miscarriages, with your husband's loss, but also in your husband's loss, having to let go of the baby that you were about to adopt. You know, you were so close to the finish line, as in becoming parents, and then letting go of that. On top of all that, there's so much accumulated loss. And yet I look at you and I'm so blown away by what you have created. And I just got a thumbs up. And for those of you who don't know that, I've shared the story many times. Ever since Rob's dad passed, I feel that Rob is coming into my Zoom meetings. I see like a little thumbs up loading on my screen, and I'm not even touching it, and then it disappears again. So people rarely see it. Only when the whole circle loads fully, then
That's so weird.
I've just got a thumbs up, and I love it when he butts into my conversation. So beautiful
Good
sign.
going, Rob.
So yeah, like share a little bit. Another one, thank you. Yes, I hear you. It's amazing. So share a little bit about your story, Shannon. Where did you go from there? Because your whole world crashed for, you know, completely unexpected for you. Like even like from the outside world, it's so much easier to say, well, didn't you see that coming? No, you are clinging on to hope when you are in the situation. So talk us through what got you from the actual loss to, okay, I need to do something with this, because as I said, I'm just very inspired by you and I want you to share that, please.
Yeah, you know, it is interesting. I think that for many people, one of the reasons why we held on so tightly was, number one, because of how young we were. And number two, because we were so scared that if we had let in any negativity at all, then we were just kind of inviting things to crumble and fall apart. And so when people say, didn't you, you know, knowing the gravity of his disease and what he'd been given. But in all honesty, I mean, I've met brain cancer patients since that are 5 years, 7 years, 10 years in. So you just never know. And that was our hope, was that you just never know. And by the time things really spiraled out of control and he was really deteriorating, he lost the ability to speak. And so even having any of those what if moments, those closure moments, he understood what I was saying. But the last thing I had in my mind at that point was having a conversation like that. I'm like, at this point, there's no point, because I don't want to break his heart. I don't want him to hurt because he sees me hurting. So the only thing I could think to do was to be strong and continue being hopeful and let him know that I loved him with every fiber of my being. And that was the only thing I wanted him to carry with him. And so that was how we spent our time.
Amazing. I just need to say how that's incredible. Really beautiful.
That was the biggest thing I wanted for him. And that was the gift I wanted for him, I wanted him to realize that, you know, we spent 20 years of our life doing everything that we wanted. And so we spent his last day literally going through every phenomenal thing we did in life, all of our travels, everywhere we went, all the experiences we had. You know, I listed it all out. I talked about his family and his sisters and my family and my siblings and how much we all loved each other, and all the picnics we had all together, and the dog we got together. You know, I just went through everything and all of the good stuff that we had built. And I said, you know, we've had such a great life. And I wanted him, that's what I wanted him to carry with him. And then after he was gone, there was no anger, you know, like there's no stages. And I've talked about this many times. I didn't go through stages of denial and anger. I was shocked. I was very shocked. And
Yeah.
I did go through, when he was first diagnosed, I went through a bargaining phase where I kind of looked up and just said, look, you
Yeah.
let him live and I will never ask for a child ever, ever again. Just get him to a better place, even if he has to live with this disease. So I went through that. But after he was gone, the reality was there. I knew, okay, I just lost the love of my life. I just lost my best friend in the entire world. Um, and it took a while. I'm still in those moments, in those throes of those moments. But, for the first year that he was gone, I slept on the couch
Mm.
downstairs. I couldn't even go upstairs.
Yeah.
Um, so it was probably 4 or 5 months after he died when I I went into the doctor for a primary care exam, and my stomach was just a mess.
Yeah.
And of course, your gut is the first thing that feels when you're physically and emotionally out of balance. And she said, you're so maxed out. She goes, you've lost some weight. And I knew I wasn't eating very well. And
Mm.
in that moment, I knew, I'm like, I need to take care of myself
Yeah.
because I haven't gone to any of my annual appointments because I was so focused on him.
Mm.
So within a few months span, I did my mammogram, I did a colonoscopy, I did my primary care exam, all
Mm.
my blood work. I knew, I'm like, I need to prioritize now taking care of me because number one, he would want that. And number two, I can't, I'm not going to let whatever evil or whatever it is, that I'm not going to let it win by knocking me down any further.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of what I used to lift myself up a little bit. And that's when I said, I need to find a purpose.
Yeah.
I need to literally find a way to help others because that's just how I function. I couldn't just sit here and try to absorb all this and learn from it. I needed to figure out a way to turn this into helping others because if I
Yeah.
didn't, then I wasn't going to be able to make sense of what just happened in
Yeah.
my life. So that's what I did was I clung to finding a purpose to help others so that his loss wouldn't be for nothing.
Mm. And that I so often say that, the finding a way to help others is so often um, a way to help yourself. It's the most beautiful side effect that has when you really
Yeah.
focus on helping others, that it is always coming back to you as well. This is, to me, this is just how the universe works. This is the universal law of you are helping and you will receive back as well. And it's that whole learning of like I had this conversation yesterday with someone. I don't know who that was now, but it doesn't really matter. The most important part of that conversation was that when we help others, we also need to learn to receive, because otherwise it becomes so unbalanced and we walk straight into a burnout, in particular when it's on a bigger scale, and in particular when it's like I remember when I ran the first retreat for Loving Life After Loss, I went straight into a burnout afterwards because I was so prepared to run the retreat, but I was not
Yeah.
prepared for the aftercare, for the aftermath, for the how do I deal with that now, to look after myself now that I held space for all these people at the
Yeah.
retreat. And I didn't feel it at the retreat. At the retreat, I felt pumped and strong and great. And then afterwards, I was like deflated. I was like, whoa, okay. So because I ran retreats before, but they were not in a grief space, so I wasn't prepared for that emotional aftermath. And I think it's really,
Yeah.
really important for us when we put ourselves out there and we give and we create movements, or we're going to get to that in a minute, what you did with that podcast, whatever. There's so much we put out there that just from from that whole balance and harmony, it can't
Yeah.
go other than unbalanced if we don't also allow ourselves to receive. So
Mhm. And that's why I keep going to counseling. I mean, that's
love
because
it.
I know that I'm still in this space of not only healing, but I am giving a lot of my story and a
Yeah.
lot of what I've walked through to others.
Yeah.
And the only way to balance being able to do that without being too overloaded is to continue going to counseling and to write and journal when I need to. And, if I get done with an interview, if it's a particularly hard interview, I'll let myself cry. I'll kind of recognize the importance of why it was so hard for me. And
Yeah.
taking care of my one remaining dog and going
Yeah.
for walks and cycling. And, I do those things because I
Mhm.
know that that's how you keep that balance.
Yeah.
And that's important. It's so important.
Yeah. Self-care, huge. Absolutely huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And I hear you. Like I had moments where when things are particularly hard, and I did that after that particular retreat, the first retreat as well, where I just sat in a hot bath and I just sobbed, and I felt so great doing it. It was such a release, and there was no, oh, poor me at all. It was just like, I so needed that. I so needed to release, and it felt amazing. So yeah. Tell us a bit about what you have created, because
Oh,
a few things out there.
yeah. So I started a podcast called Game On Glio, and it's a combination of talking about grief and loss,
Yeah.
particularly young grief and loss, but also talking about brain cancer and
Mm.
really advocating and educating multiple communities, I mean, across the globe
Yeah.
about what brain cancer is and having more awareness of
Mm.
it. Um, we battle so many different cancers, and it's not like, and it's interesting because when I built the podcast, when I first started it, it was really meant to be a storytelling platform to really give patients a space
Yeah.
to tell their story and to live on if something happens, to give caregivers a space to share
Mm.
their journey, to connect with other caregivers, and then to allow doctors to come on and talk about the difficulties of this for them. I mean, they're on the front lines, and most people don't realize that a lot of these doctors are just as passionately involved with wanting to figure this out. And they are really, really fighting.
Mm.
And people don't see that because the doctors aren't really telling their private
Of
stories.
course not. Yeah.
They're not talking about why this matters to them so much, because when you meet with a doctor in their office, it's very professional. They're there to do a job, but
Mm.
on the podcast, I get them to open up. And so we had created this space to do all that. But what came out of it was, we're now going into the we're in the thick of the second season,
Mm.
and it's become a very hopeful podcast
Yeah.
because I learn a lot by interviewing the guests and by telling these stories. And then I have these thoughts afterward, and I share the thoughts that I have about how much this means to all of us, and the uplifting nature of the work that's being done. I mean, just in the last 3 years since Mike was diagnosed, and in just the last two since he passed, there are treatments and options available that weren't even available when he was diagnosed. And so that's really empowering. And having an empowering feeling, it does so much for you physically and emotionally, and it carries a lot of weight when you can empower somebody and let them know that, not only that they're not alone, but there's this community built around it.
Yeah.
And so it really started to take off, and we've created something very special with this podcast that isn't really out there, ironically. And there's a couple of other medically driven ones,
Mm.
and there was one that kind of fizzled out really quickly. And this is really a lot of people. I mean, we get a lot of people from Australia. I've spoken to a number of people that have lost loved ones to brain cancer, patients who've reached out to us. We had a patient reach out to us from Ireland whose doctor referred her to the podcast. So
Wow.
um,
That's
it's just
amazing.
been amazing to see, and for people to be able to just sit and listen
Yeah.
to information and to a story where it's not, you don't feel like it's just this medical thing that's kind of being pounded into you. It's a story that's compassionately told, and bringing information in, and you can just sit and listen to it, and you don't have to dig through information or go onto a government site to
Yeah.
look up clinical trials. And
Yeah.
so it's been really beautiful to see how it's transformed. And out of that, we were able to start Traphagen's Trail Ride for Brain Cancer, which we just finished our second cycling event.
Yeah.
Um, we're just closing. We won't close the fundraiser till the end of the month, but it's our second year doing it, and we've raised over $24,000. And it's not
Wow.
a ton, but I mean, it's
That's
it's a
a huge amount
start.
of
It's
money
a
still.
start.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it makes a huge difference because there aren't a lot of places doing a ton of fundraising for brain cancer. So, you know, it's just small step. It's a small, you know, it's something small, but again, it's bringing community together and it's getting people to be more aware of it, and it's honoring Mike's legacy. And that was something I wanted to do, was honor his memory when I started the podcast, and um, to have him live on through this, but then also to allow other patients to kind of be encapsulated in this podcast, because it'll live forever. So
that is so beautiful. I just had goosebumps when you said it, because it's gonna live forever. You know, it really is about that, to leave a legacy, to leave something behind, so people can hear about that story and also get hope through that. You know, not just how to cope with it, but also the education, the ongoing education, the ongoing fundraising, the research. You know, to, as you said, it's beautiful to know that it is going forward and that it will save more people, so they don't have to go through that. And I find once you take your own adversity and turn it into something like you have, you know, where you do fight, where you do go into advocacy, into education, this is when it actually makes a difference. And to take your own adversity to make a difference in other people's lives always comes back to you. I'm a big believer in that. So there is so many blessings all around, both ways. They're coming out from you, they're coming back to you. And I just really, really love that. And Shannon, please do us a favor and share links in the comments below the interview, and get people to know how they can support you, how they can connect with you, how they can reach out to you. There are so many different levels that you offer, and I would really like for people to see that in our group, in our movement, and way beyond, because these interviews always get shared outside of the group as well. I cannot thank you enough for being here today. This is so enriching for me to see the hope that you put out there, and I really love that. You have got such strength and beauty inside and out. I just really love that we connected. I feel richer for having met you. And before we go, is there anything else that you would like to share, or any shout out that you want to put out there to the world? I'd really love to hear from you.
I would love people to just know that, especially for me, and it's something I'll talk about a lot more as things develop, but I've really started using grief as my teacher, and teaching me and guiding me. And that has been an interesting development over the last few months. There are still hard times and still ups and downs. I'm still fairly new in the process, but I'm not scared of it anymore, like I was in the beginning. So, and I'm grateful to have a community of people. You know, I mean, I've met so many amazing people. I mean, you know, when you and I first did our first Zoom introduction, and we really connected and bonded, and I've met so many other individuals that way. I've met patients that that are just so dear to me now, and sponsors that have, you know, come out of the woodwork, people I've never talked to before that wanted to support the work we were doing. And so it's been a gift. Even in very, very hard moments, it is still, you know, I heard a phrase, actually, there was an NFL game, a football game for America on last night. There was an individual who scored for the first time this season, and he just lost his little brother, only in his early 20s, tragically, a month and a half ago. And the coach told him, it's actually an NFL team in my backyard, and the coach told him, the light always shines down on those who go through adversity. The light will always shine through somehow, some way. And when I saw that last night, and I heard them repeat that after this gentleman scored for the first time this season, and the kid looked up, and went like that. And then they repeated what the coach had told to him, and that just stuck with me. And so I want to share that with people, because it will find a way, and I'm still waiting for it for me, but it will always find a way to shine through. And so that's what we hold on to, is that light. No matter what the adversity is, we hold on to that light.
Yeah. And if I may say, just watch out that light that's shining down on you is not sort of, how do you call that, cancelled out by all the light that you are putting out into the world, you know, because you put so much light there into the world. You really do. What you do is so amazing and really such a beautiful, shining example, you know, what you can do with adversity, how you shine light into other people's lives, that maybe every now and then allow that in and see if that's not already shining on you, and you might not even be noticing it. Because, you know, I
That is
often
true.
I so often talk about the hidden gifts and adversity, and it takes for us to sometimes stop and actually really pay attention to it. And I'm not saying you're not paying attention, because you do, but you pay attention to so much out there that sometimes it's really important to bring it back to ourselves as well and allow that in, you know, that whole balance of giving and receiving that we talked about before, because you give a lot and you gave a lot to us today. I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here and sharing your story and everything that you do and that you are to this world. You are such a blessing, Shannon. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. And yeah, we'll be sharing this interview far and wide. And for anyone listening, please do let us know what your most important takeaway was. I'd really love to read that in the comments below. And as always, please feel free to subscribe to our newsletter, to our YouTube channel, so you get the updates, and share it far and wide with anybody that you feel that this interview can make a difference to. Thank you so much for being here. This is Shannon and Marie signing off. Bye for now.